This is the story of a man.
He's a very good person to talk to about really anything that's going on in your life.
So I think Mr. Murphy, one thing he does is he's really good at finding connections.
Of constant energy, compassion, and quite honestly, youth too.
But in a lot of ways, Chris is kind of that energizer bunny. He's just always doing stuff.
First thing that strikes you about him is that he's pretty gregarious.
You can really tell he wants to be there, he wants you to learn, he wants you to love it, he wants you to feel welcome.
He really understands the importance of relationships. Students need to know how much you care in order for them to care about the things that you're trying to teach them.
He's a special, caring, and priceless gem, dedicated to God full-heartedly.
Hi, my name is Chris Murphy, and I'm the Fine Arts Department Chair here at Concordia.
You know, there are many teachers that have long, successful careers that don't really, it's not that they don't care about the kids, but they just see there's this separation. I'm the teacher, you're the student. And, you know, when the course is done, we're done.
It's not often that really you can have that teacher and student barrier become something more than just that.
But Chris Murphy really wants to know your answer. He's genuinely interested, he truly cares, and that comes across.
Chris still contacts my kids that have graduated. He texts them every week to say, how can I pray for you?
I have a group of people, I wouldn't say probably 120, that I text on Sundays and just ask them for prayer requests. If they give me something specific like on Thursday, this is going on, then I'll text them that Thursday morning and say, hey, praying this goes well for you.
And he's maintained all these friendships, and they're not just surface level. No, he goes deeper.
To me, that shows he really cares about those kids, and he's committed to being a part of their life and maybe helping them, guide them.
For Chris, it comes through in those qualities of care for people.
Those are the things. You look for ways to make people's days better.
We're going to actually understand him, know what it is that makes people's days better.
A passion for what we're doing together.
We do prayers before each rehearsal, before each performance.
He or one of the staff members gives a devotion, and they tie that devotion to the show, and they tie it to God.
The living legacy that Chris provides is such a wonderful model for all of us.
This is the story of Chris Murphy. Chris Murphy, who I call Mr. Murphy, he's the Fine Arts Department Chair at Concordia Lutheran High School in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He's someone who I saw as once upon a time just the director of the theater department at Concordia. And then he was a teacher of mine for my musical theater class. And now, a dear friend.
So I'm the Fine Arts Department Chair, so I'm in charge of the Fine Arts Department, which is the band, the choir, the yearbook, the art department, the video department, and the theater department. I teach 2 algebra classes at the current time. I have a class called Education Professions, which is a course that's designed to help students decide if they want to become a teacher or some other kind of church worker. Could be a pastor, could be a deaconess, something along those lines. And then I teach a variety of theater courses. I have 5 different theater courses that I teach.
So we start at the beginning, actually, with Murphy just entering into his college years at Concordia, Chicago. He partook in fine arts and also, during that time, grew actually a lot in faith. And did he ever meet some amazing friendly faces that little did he know would become his co-workers that he works with today.
My name is Tim LaCroix.
Now, let me introduce to you the former theater director of Concordia Lutheran High School, David.
I'm a Concordia Ann Arbor grad. My first full-time teaching job was with Concordia. I was the drama director for 16 years before Chris. I taught English at Concordia when I was in Fort Wayne, and then I was also the drama director. And as it happens, Chris went to River Forest, or Concordia Chicago, as it's now called. But he did go to school with Mr. LaCroix.
And how long have you known Chris Murphy for?
Since we were freshmen in college, so that's more than 40 years.
And when Mr. LaCroix was the choir director, Chris and Mr. LaCroix and I did musicals together.
I didn't always know what I wanted to be. I would say my grandma was a kindergarten teacher, and so I kind of decided I thought that would be something that I would enjoy doing. I started college thinking I would teach high school, but then I realized that at that time I wasn't ready for that. So I went to Concordia, Chicago, where I studied for 4 years.
For all 4 years, we had a very unique group of guys because there was a good number of us that stayed together on the same dorm floor all 4 years of college. And then we just shared a lot of musical experiences together.
In college, I was, as far as my extracurriculars, I was in the Capella, which is the top choir there at Concordia, as well as being in most of the theater productions.
As he better grew, connected to his love for the fine arts, he also grew in faith significantly.
My family always took me to church. We belonged to St. Paul's. And it was kind of like, you go to church because your parents go to church. I just always felt that's what I needed to do. But I've always been a believer in Christ. I've always trusted in him and always seen him as a good friend as well as my savior.
In fact, so much so that he would go from Illinois, where River Forest was, to Indiana, to a place called Camp Luther Haven, a non-for-profit organization that's Christian. And it's all about faith-based learning and experiences for kids. He wanted to volunteer and work to help kids develop their passions for theater and love for God at the same time.
But I feel like my faith really became my own when I worked at Camp Luther Haven. I did 5 summers there, and I think that was where my faith life really became alive for me.
Yeah, he talked about that quite a bit. Yep, he really seemed to enjoy his experiences at Camp Luther Haven. He, again, being gregarious, he always had a great circle of people that he would talk to, interact with, be friendly with.
Theater, passions, love for God and kids, it all made sense for Murphy to take part in, and he would do it for quite a few years. Murphy graduated in 1985, and as a testament to his enthusiasm and friendly, extroverted nature, he didn't waste time finding things to do, that's for sure.
I graduated with an elementary education degree in May, and I started teaching in August. 1985, I taught 4th grade in Peoria, Illinois, and I did the before-school theater program. I don't like to be idle. I have a hard time just sitting still and doing nothing. For the most part, I would define myself as an extrovert.
It is 1987. He's teaching in Peoria, Illinois, and it is his 3rd year of doing drama camp at Camp Luther Haven. And he now meets Deb Zeckzer. Him meeting Mrs. Zeckzer would have profound impacts a decade and a half later.
During our staff training canoe trip that summer, so the first big weekend I had spent with him, that night sitting at the campfire, we were singing, and I think I was doing a descant on one of the songs, and he ended up looking at me, listening to me sing, and then looking at our director and saying, "She's a keeper." And that small gesture meant the world to me, because it was like somebody is affirming my value, somebody is noticing that I'm good at something, and I was a college kid at this point. Similar to a high school kid, you still want to feel that connection, that value.
She is a mom of a 2024 CLHS graduate, the last of her kids to graduate Concordia.
Chris was an incredible people person. Chris could make you feel like you were the center of his world simply with the conversation he was having with you. Chris knew how to pull out the best in people.
We were counselors together, and we just got to be really good friends. Worked at camp. I think our personalities were similar, and I think our faith life was similar. I think too, your work ethic at camp, you're kind of drawn to the people who kind of work the way you do, and she and I just got to be good friends.
And then a couple years later, I came to Fort Wayne first, and he was still in Peoria. We still had good friend connections, not just he and I, but a few other people around us too that we would stay in contact with. Months would often go by and we wouldn't see each other. When we did, it was kind of like picking up from where we left off.
Chris coming back to do drama at Concordia Fort Wayne was when he was teaching in Peoria.
When I taught in Peoria, I had a friend back here in Fort Wayne who was the drama director here at Concordia, and he invited me back to do some choreography. So that was kind of, did a little bit of that with high schoolers.
One of the things that was great about Chris is he always made everything fun. As a director, I don't think I always made everything fun for my kids. Sometimes it was work and I didn't see the humor in it, but Chris could see humor in anything. And the kids loved him because of that, and he never stops. I'm on summer vacation and I'm not going to be thinking about school. Chris was always right into, well, hey, it's summertime, let's do this summer musical. Do something during the, well, I'll direct. Okay, well, if you'll direct, then I will happily let you do that.
I'm Chaim Van Meter. I met Mr. Murphy sometime in middle school in a show called The Trouble of Zerubbabel. And Mr. Murphy was the director for that show over at Trinity English with his sister, Mrs. Hobby, helping. And he led the music, he led the acting, he gave us all our rules, and he led the show for everybody. That was my first experience seeing him as a director. Was very engaging, but also pretty strict because there was a lot of little kids, so he had to keep us under control, which he did very well, but in a way that made you know that he cared about you, and a way that made you know like he cared about the show, and he wanted the show to move forward, and he wanted you to not embarrass yourself out on the stage. And through everything he does, he pushes you to be your best, and he challenged us while still being engaging and making it an awesome and enjoyable thing for us to do.
He wanted to actually impact all of those in and out of his workplace, in and out of the school building, to better grow their faith and, of course, their love of theater as well.
I feel like it's really important to really acknowledge people and to spend that time with them. I feel like sometimes this could be the only high point of their day, the only spot where somebody gets to talk to them or somebody acknowledges them. And I just think your spiritual life has to be the base for your life. I think if that is in place, then I think everything else can fall into place as well.
I think definitely that's foundation. He is a lifelong Christian, lifelong Lutheran, and he knows that every single person that he meets is a child of God.
I think part of it is, and I say this to the kids a lot of times, I would not do this if it weren't for the relationships. If I'm not building relationships with people, then it's not worth the time. You know, any kid that can breathe, I will at some point in time say, hey, how about why don't you try theater? Have you ever thought about theater? It's a life-changing experience.
He wants them to know that. He wants every single person that he comes into contact with to know their value and their place.
God had a wonderful plan in store to bring into Murphy's life so many lifelong connections he would cherish for many years to come.
So I knew my family was here, and I knew that eventually I wanted to teach in Fort Wayne. So I was just ready to make that change, and I felt that's where God wanted me to go at that point in time. And so I took a call to Emmanuel St. Michael.
My name is Rebecca Stout. I have known Chris Murphy for a very long time. I went to high school here 20 years ago. Chris Murphy was directing plays even back then, but I really got to know Chris Murphy on a more personal level and a more professional level when he came here to Concordia Lutheran High School. He left ESM. ESM called my husband, and so we got to know him and his wife through that. He actually worked with my husband and answered all kinds of questions as my husband was taking over the call that Mr. Murphy had previously done.
At Emmanuel St. Michael, we had at least 11.
Okay, so currently I'm serving as the interim executive director for the Lutheran Schools Partnership in Fort Wayne. And we serve Concordia Lutheran High School, 18 elementary Lutheran schools in Northeast Indiana, and 33 early childhood programs in Northeast Indiana. We ended up working together again when I was assistant principal at Emmanuel St. Michael, and he was teaching 8th grade there at ESM.
And then we just continued using him, kept adding to what he could do because now he was here.
Then when I left ESM, I accepted the call here to the Lutheran Schools Partnership, and I'm in Concordia High School, and now Chris Murphy is serving at the high school.
He became one of my assistants and began to direct, not just help with, but actually direct some of our shows.
I've had the privilege to work with him on a number of committees. So one of the things that I admire about Mr. Murphy is that he is so great at building relationships with students.
One of the biggest things, he's always looking you in the eye. He always is willing to, give you a handshake. He's constantly saying, hi, how are you just comes across as so genuine. And he's always shaking hands and just, I think you see him that way all of the time.
The pastor today preaches at Emmanuel St. Michael in Fort Wayne, but I investigated a little further his story and his connections to Mr. Murphy, and it was revealed to me his connections to Murphy actually are rooted in Concordia Lutheran High School's theater department.
I got to know Mr. Murphy when I was still teaching at Concordia High School. I was an English teacher there, and he was teaching here at Emmanuel St. Michael. And so I also directed plays, so we got to know each other really before I was ever a pastor or ever even at Emmanuel.
Yeah, he was the best man at the wedding.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Nice. Okay, so he was also the English teacher at Concordia Lutheran High School as well. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, he was an English teacher, and he was one of my assistant drama directors.
Who would have thought Pastor Eggold, Thomas Eggold himself, actually assistant directed with David Cush from the fall of 1992 to the spring of 1996.
All of these traditions that carried on will only carry on because he did such a good job in putting them together, which all goes into him really caring about the students and wanting to make that difference and wanting to show them what a servant is like.
In 1996, Pastor Eggold would get a calling from Emmanuel Lutheran Church to become a youth pastor and family minister leader there. That gave Murphy 5 years later the opportunity to become David Cush's assistant in 2001.
Really great things that Mr. Murphy has done in his career is use the arts to be an extension of his faith and his understanding of all that God has given to us, not just in theology, but in the world and in the unique gifts. And art is a wonderful way to express that. And Mr. Murphy has always been a leader in using the arts to glorify God.
Certainly. Patrick Fairking is the principal of Concordia Lutheran High School and notes how Murphy is currently teaching there and setting an absolutely outstanding example to his co-workers and to the students he teaches.
You know, what we call our personality, our character comes through. For Chris, it comes through in those qualities of care for people. You definitely see that in the classroom as far as the individual attention that he gives in his way, in his manner with students, and then when needed with other colleagues and with parents.
And he cares not only about the students who are in his classes at the moment, but also how they're doing when they leave his classes and how they're doing when they leave the high school.
So I first met Chris Murphy when I was coming into Concordia as a freshman and was auditioning for The Outsiders and didn't make it as a role in that show, but I worked backstage and found out that I liked that was where I fit in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And she had that interest anyway. She was my student. We built a friendship, and then we worked together here. And we're still friends. I mean, we still are good friends to this day. We can talk about things and share things about life and faith.
Then I just stayed in the program the whole time through high school and then kept coming back for set work Saturdays through college. And then even more so when I was here as a teacher.
You know, there are many teachers that have long, successful careers that don't really, it's not that they don't care about the kids, but they just see there's this separation. I'm the teacher, you're the student. And, you know, when the course is done, we're done. And you move on to the next thing and as a student, and the teacher moves on to the next group of students. But because Chris makes that connection, to me, that shows he really cares about those kids.
Murphy actively stays in contact with alumni from classes in the past and former thespians from the theater program at CLHS, such as Michael Habegger, a family friend of Murphy. Murphy has known the Habeggers for a long, long time.
So I met Mr. Murphy probably when I was in 6th grade. Mr. Murphy is a very, amicable guy. So he talked to our family, just got to know us. And then from there, he kind of heavily encouraged me to join the middle school musical that he was doing. I think it was Annie at that time. I ended up being the dog. I crawled around, and I loved every second of it. I didn't think I would. I never thought I would be a theater person. I had fun with it in middle school, but I really wanted to be an athlete. Started playing football in high school, freshman year, sophomore year. I was very bad at football.
There's so much push for sports and sports camps. I think that kids are naturally going to get to do all those things, but that's not for everybody. When I was a kid, my mom made me do every sport all the way through grade school because she wanted me to be well-rounded. I am grateful for that because I feel like that helped me be who I am, but I did enjoy most of the sporting things that I did. It wasn't until I found theater that I found this is where I belong.
So I spent so much time working on football, and Mr. Murphy just barely convinced me to do drama in high school, and I wouldn't have done it if it hadn't been for Mr. Murphy. I had no desire to do the play, I just liked Mr. Murphy, and so I did it for him.
We've actually heard Mr. Murphy's faith story. It's absolutely incredible. And how he made it his own and grew in his faith even more right after college. And people are now meeting Mr. Murphy. It's absolutely incredible. But how are his connections to all these people unique? Do you know someone who actively texts 100 people to ask how they are doing and then pray for them on Sunday? I don't think so. That's next for the story.
Our lives have intersected because my 4 kids have gone to Concordia High School.
My name is Zeckzer. I think Mr. Murphy is a very good teacher, instructor, anything. He teaches stuff well, he knows how to get stuff done, and he always has like a Christ-centered focus.
My name is Kaleb Zeckzer. I graduated in 2020. It was before my 6th grade year when he first introduced himself and asked me to be in the shows as a little grade schooler for Joseph the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. I'd say one of my most unique experiences is getting to learn choreography from him. Getting his, direction on those is just a good time because he's not afraid to admit when he messes up, and then we all just laugh about it.
Chris still contacts my kids that have graduated. He texts them every week to say, how can I pray for you?
I have a group of people, I wouldn't say probably 120, that I text on Sundays and just ask them for prayer requests. And then I have in my notes on my iPad, I write down their requests and I pray for them all week. And if they give me something specific, like on Thursday, this is going on, then I'll text them that Thursday morning and say, hey, praying this goes well for you. So then I think it builds the relationship, because if I'm praying for your mom, that's going to, you and I are going to grow closer because we're sharing that information. And I think it helps them to see it in the power of prayer as well, because then sometimes it turns around and they'll say, well, how can I pray for you? Well, that's a discipline that's good for them to build as well.
Chris's heart is in and of the Lord, and from that just comes a real genuine sense and care for other people. So very empathetic individual. That comes through in so many different ways of how he communicates, both verbally and non-verbally.
You will find those moments where you can make connections to your faith, to the Bible, to Jesus, and he makes sure to highlight those moments, which is very uplifting and a very good thing.
When my kids graduated, he made each one of them one of these posters with things they had done in the drama world, and he brings it to them at their graduation party. He comes to graduation parties. He affirms the kids' value just by showing up.
There are relationships there that are worth maintaining and deepening.
That's the way good friendship works. That's not just Chris Murphy and I, that's what a good friend is.
Connection. To me, that shows he really cares about those kids, and he's committed to being a part of their life and maybe helping them, guide them, being an advisor to them, willing to share his wisdom with them. I just see that that's something that Chris is always willing to do.
He actually connects with people outside of the CLHS community, around Fort Wayne and wherever else he goes. He seeks to branch out his bonds with people. Murphy worked at Kilwin's, an ice cream shop. A colleague of his by the name of Theo Pancake recounts working with Mr. Murphy.
So I think Mr. Murphy, one thing he does is he's really good at finding connections to build a friendship, or him finding connections between other people is to kind of, I guess, build a friendship for them. Mm-hmm. So he met Theo at work and knew he was going to Ball State, and he knew me from school. He just had us meet up, and that kind of developed the friendship that me and Theo have now.
I met Mr. Murphy working at an ice cream shop called Kilwin's that moved here to Fort Wayne. I started working there when they first opened in 2021, and he came along. He was very close with the owners, Paul and Renee Marinko, and they got him a job there, and working Friday nights after school throughout the school year, and we just created a close friendship.
You and I work together, and sometimes there's people you just hit it off with immediately. We immediately hit it off at work. We probably got in trouble a couple times. We were working while we were talking, but we really got to know each other.
Yeah, he's a extremely friendly person. Like, he always greets people with a smile, and he's always happy to be there.
We kind of made a commitment to each other that we would get together once a month and have coffee for a couple hours and spend time and, you know, catch him at light, but also a faith base. And I think the faith base is what brought us together initially.
I think if you would ask Mr. Murphy, like, why he stays at Kilwins, it's definitely because of the atmosphere and the environment.
Working at Kilwins, I don't share my faith like talking about Jesus, but I share my faith in the way that I act. Yes. I treat people kindly. I make the customer, I help them come first. I had a woman who came in the other day, and you make a lot of calls at the last minute, but she came in and she just said, I remember a really crappy day, blah, blah, I want ice cream, and I went and grabbed her a couple of free little candy bars and gave her those. She goes, what are these for? And I said, well, you said you're having a crappy day, I thought maybe this. And she thanked me, and then she went out and ate her ice cream. She came back in and thanked me again.
That has been an encouragement to me. As I'm going through stuff, there's always somebody that's going to be there, that, you know, a shoulder to lean on.
And of course, as your type of relationship changes, you get to see more sides of a person or deeper into a person, but you know, he's a solid person through and through.
For Chris, it comes through in those qualities of care for people, a passion for what we're doing together. So you see that in the theater when it's rehearsal, and eventually that comes through at performance time. You definitely see that in the classroom.
We do prayers before each rehearsal, before each performance.
All of these traditions that carried on will only carry on because he did such a good job in putting them together, which all goes into him really caring about the students and wanting to make that difference and wanting to show them what a servant is like.
Everybody is a combination of all different people planting into them, and I think you have to determine who are the people that are planting good seeds in you and who are the people that are not, who are putting the weeds in you, that you have to kind of tear those weeds out.
While we can never be exactly like someone else, we can reflect their nature in what we do.
I think noticing people is a huge thing. I think standing outside my classroom and speaking to kids in the hallway, knowing people's names. I spend a lot of time trying to know people's names so I can call them their name and use it, because I think that's important. And you never know if I'm the only one. Maybe I'm the only one that said hi to that person in that particular day.
See, there's really one person that we should be reflecting in what we do. And there's one person we should always strive to be like, just like Chris Murphy does.
Murphy is an amazing example of helping other people to see that they are special, valued, and loved by God.
When we are kind, caring, loving, reflecting the nature of our Father who are in heaven, when we do that, it makes others' lives better. Murphy said it so well himself.
Yeah, he said, those are the things. You look for ways to make people's days better.
That he really understands the importance of relationships.
One thing he does is he's really good at finding connections between other people, to kind of, build a friendship for them. So
he always comes across very positive, upbeat.
But in a lot of ways, Chris is kind of that energizer bunny. He's always doing stuff.
Comes through in those qualities of care for people.
An amazing example.
That puts a nice spin on your day when you come across it.
He knows
Extremely
that
friendly person.
every single person that he meets is a child of God.